John, happy to have you back. It's been a little while since we've been able to sit down and record. Your schedule's been busy. Mine's been busy. And now here we are, late spring of 2025.
Yep.
And we're heading into summer, and I know it's only going to get crazier.
That's right. But technology,
True.
right? Part of the delay
It has been.
has been the technology.
Yeah.
Because, somebody is listening right now. They're sitting in their car. They're on their way to work. They're like, oh, new episode.
Yes.
I'm going to download that. That person doesn't know, though, that they could watch this
On YouTube.
on YouTube.
Right. Which I knew would be a big, hairy beast to slay. And sure enough, it was.
And it has. If you would like to know how you can buy equipment and then realize you only bought part of the equipment and then you have to buy more equipment, and then more equipment you bought was the wrong equipment.
Yep.
And so you've got to buy different more equipment.
You need equipment to run that equipment now.
And you need equipment to run that equipment.
Right. That's recording an audio podcast is so easy.
It's relatively simple. That's right. Which is why so many people do it, right? That's why there's a million out there.
But when you turn the cameras on, things change.
It does.
Things change a lot.
Yes.
So, on this podcast, John, we have talked a lot about estate planning.
Uh-huh. Sure.
And this is a topic that we have gone over and over, maybe because that's what you do professionally, right?
It could be. Yeah, that's a possibility.
And because you do that professionally, we tend to get into the weeds sometimes.
Also true, right? I mean, so many times we're focused on an aspect,
Right.
And even that aspect is a subset of a bigger aspect.
Yeah. We talk about the role of perpetuities, the taxation of special needs trust, and those kind of things. But it occurred to me that I think it would be a really good idea if we went back and laid a solid foundation in estate planning in an episode series that our listeners and viewers could go back to and watch over and over again to make sure they get the basics down.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, what are the fundamental parts to a good estate plan, right?
Yeah.
What are the pieces that you have to have that every one of them should have, right? Because then whether you're going in to discuss estate planning for the first time, you're armed with knowledge. That helps you. Frankly, that helps you guide the conversation, because if you're not getting the feedback from the advisor, the attorney that you want, that you're expecting, maybe that's not the right person, that they're not being thorough enough,
Right.
And if you already have stuff in place, then this gives you an opportunity to maybe look at it and ask some of these same questions. Does it accomplish these primary fundamental goals?
Yeah. I saw a survey the other day that said that only 34% of adults in the U.S. have estate planning in place.
That's correct. And that's been the case for years.
It's around a third.
Yeah.
And you know why most people don't have it in place? I mean, some of it's just apathy, right? It's like,
Yeah, it's easy to push off.
yeah, it is. It's like going to get one of those heart scans, that they do. It's like, oh, I'll do that later.
Yeah, you can push it. You can push it off. It's always, you can do it later.
Yeah. But a big part of the reason is it just seems complicated.
Right.
I've got to go sit down. I know I'm going to have to think about all this stuff. Some of this stuff I'm not prepared to think about right now. I don't want to make these hard decisions. And therefore you push it off because it just seems like it's going to be a lot.
That's right. And I've had this conversation with client meetings where, they come in, they don't know what they want, but they've made the leap to come in, right? And I ask them a bunch of questions. I learn about them. I do some explaining. I make some recommendations. Everything that I've recommended and explained is actually quite complicated. But the big picture is simple.
Yeah.
Right? And what I'm giving them is the big picture. They don't need to know the details. Right? I don't know that I've ever mentioned the rule against perpetuities in an actual client meeting. Right?
I hope not.
I have. There have probably been one or two, but those have been nerds, so it's fine. But But you don't need to get into the weeds. And so, yeah, you don't need to get bogged down in thinking, well, it's so complicated. That's why you get the advisor.
Absolutely.
Is let them worry about the complications and get you the big picture on how to do it.
It's something we say all the time here. Without clarity, you'll never have confidence.
Correct.
And that's the one thing that people need. They need confidence in their estate plan. They need confidence in their retirement plan. They need confidence in who's doing their taxes. The whole big picture approach that we talk about, right? They need confidence in all of that. But I'll tell you, the estate plan's a little different because this is, in many cases, something that's going to happen after you are unable to provide input.
Right. I mean, you really are planning for a future, and a future that you neither know what that looks like now, nor will you be able to react when it happens.
Right. And therefore, the level of confidence that you need to have in your estate plan needs to be higher than it probably does in these other areas. That we talked about.
In retirement planning, you can adjust on every year, and you can do things. But at the point where you become incapacitated, and certainly at your death, you're going to be very limited.
Yeah. So I don't know how many episodes this is going to cover. We talked about that we would call this the 3 parts to a perfect estate plan, and that's the extent of our planning that we did.
That's right.
On the episodes, right?
Yeah. We said it's going to be the 3 parts, which would seem like that would be 3 episodes. But given our detailed planning before each episode,
who knows?
Who knows?
But we did decide that, you know what, we probably ought to kick off episode 1 by talking about planning for incapacity.
Right, because and just, as the preview to the whole, right? There's essentially 3 parts to a good estate plan. And part 1 is you have to have a plan for incapacity. This is the most commonly overlooked part, because when people think about estate planning, they inevitably think about who gets what when I die.
Yes.
Right? It's the death part. But you've got to back it up. You're most likely going to be incapacitated before death.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for a short period of time, maybe for a long period of time, but you will be incapacitated.
Someone's going to have to make decisions on your behalf at some point in your lifetime.
At some point, unless you just get smoked in a car wreck or something, right? There will be that period of incapacity.
Yeah.
And so that's the first part, right? You've got to have a plan for that.
And John, this is part of the estate planning that when people think about estate planning, they don't think about this part, though. I'll give you an example of that. So just last night, I was watching a video in preparation for a class that I teach on Wednesday nights at our church. And the presenter was talking about insurance, and here's all the kinds of insurance you need. And it was interesting because one of the types of insurance that he listed was a will. He had that classed in as insurance. And I get that, right? That does give you some insurance that things are going to be processed. So you can kind of make that leap, right? He never, ever mentioned, though, as part of that defensive strategy, that maybe you should have some other documents in place in case you don't just fall over dead.
Right. I used to one of my favorite speeches that I give routinely is I title it "My 5 Biggest Mistakes," and it's the 5 biggest mistakes that people make before they ever come to see me. Right.
Yeah. And
number 1, my number 1 right out of the gate is thinking that the will is the most important document in your estate plan.
Mm-hmm. That's what you think of, right? I don't have a will. I feel like I'm unprepared. Well, that may not be your biggest problem.
Right. Well, and I always make the joke in the speeches. I say, you don't hear lawyers make a lot of promises, right? If you're watching like the guy standing on top of the 18-wheeler on the TV commercial, but in the fine print at the bottom of the screen, it's like, we do not make any guarantees of success, right? It's, there's always the disclaimer. But I tell everybody in the audience, I say, I'm going to promise everybody in the room something right now. I promise you will not care whether or not you have a will.
Yeah.
And there's this confused silence until the first person figures it out.
Yeah.
That, you'll be dead before it matters to anybody.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And yet, again, going back to, there's this period of incapacity. And that is actually what matters to you.
For sure.
Right. And so, So I guess kind of just jumping into it, right? I mean, there's there's 4 things right off the bat that everybody walking around over the age of 18 should have in place.
Okay.
All of it related to incapacity. So the first one would be what you could generally refer to as a financial power of attorney.
Okay.
Right? Anybody who's ever tried to talk to the phone company for somebody else, right? Perfect example. My daughter, when she was a teenager, she broke her phone, as they all do.
Surely
apparently.
not teenagers.
Yes.
Breaking phones, dropping them constantly.
And so she and I are over at the Verizon store, picking out a new phone, trying to make the insurance claim on the old phone. And the salesman's very helpful and happy to assist right up until he looks up the account. And then he looks up the account, he types in the primary phone number, and he says, are one of y'all Lisa? Who, of course, is my wife, right?
Right.
Well, no, that's my wife. And I'm here with our daughter. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, the account is in her name.
Oh.
And so she's the one that has to authorize the insurance claim. She's the one that has to authorize the purchase of a new phone and change the terms of the plan. And so I've got to call my wife and get her on the phone, which is annoying and inconvenient. But if I was trying to deal with Verizon because my wife had a stroke and she's never going to speak again,
right,
we have a problem.
Yes, a big problem.
Right? And if Verizon is that serious about who they will talk to and who they won't talk to, right? How serious is Medicare?
Yep.
The people that administer your 401k.
Yeah.
The IRS.
Yeah.
Right? So
your bank or
your
credit
bank,
union.
Everybody that you deal with.
Yeah.
If you can't deal with them, somebody else is going to have to do that on your behalf. And this is your financial power of attorney.
Yeah.
Right? The problem is that's not as simple as it sounds, right? Because you're going to, right off the bat, you're going to have a couple of things. So first of all, let's say, Devin, I'm going to appoint you as my agent under the power of attorney, right? Well, one of the first things is going to be, well, if I'm going to say, okay, Devin, here's this list of powers that you have. Do you have these powers now?
Yes.
Like right now? Like I can still do things, but
Right.
you could also do them?
Yeah.
Or do you only get those powers if I'm incapacitated?
Okay. So, for example, if you appointed me as your agent under the power of attorney, then that's effectively asking the question, could I go to the bank right now and make a withdrawal, quote unquote, on your behalf?
Correct.
Or does that have to be triggered by some event?
Right. Like, if John becomes incapacitated, then Devin has the following powers.
Yes.
Right? Because again, I've given speeches on this stuff a million times, and I can always ask the audience, which one of those two sounds like the right choice?
Oh, I'll answer that. On behalf of our audience watching and listening, I'll say that it's the one that triggers at my incapacity.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
it gives you the most protection.
And, I've even talked to, because I'll hire new attorneys who are fresh out of law school. I have a daughter that's in law school right now and has had this very conversation with the professors.
Oh, yeah.
Same answer.
I'm sure.
They'll say, these are your two options. And the correct option is the springing power of attorney. It comes into effect on that condition.
Yes.
And I can tell you all of those people, including those law school professors, are wrong.
Tell us why.
They're wrong. Well, so first of all, let's just think of it in broad sense, right?
Okay.
Why wouldn't I want you to have the power right now?
Because you think I'm going to start using it when I shouldn't.
Right. So am I better off in a situation where you have that power and I'm incapacitated?
Right. Now you have no power to do anything about it.
Yeah. Does my incapacity somehow alleviate the concern that you will misuse the power?
My unethical behavior gets better.
Or does
when you get disabled.
I don't trust you now, but if I become incapacitated, my level of trust over you just skyrockets, and all of a sudden you're the most honorable person on the planet.
Right.
That's the dumbest idea. If you just think about it in the big context, right?
That's right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no.
But here's the reality. So let's say I've been in a car wreck, right? I've got a head injury. I'm at the hospital. I'm unconscious. And at the same time, my cable bill is due, right? And so you're the agent under this power of attorney that says you only have the power if John's incapacitated. Well, I'm clearly incapacitated, right?
Right.
So you go to the bank and you say, I need to pull out $100 because I got to pay John's cable bill. And the bank looks at the power of attorney and they say, well, wait a second, Devin. This says you only have the power if John's incapacitated.
Yeah.
How do we know? Well, you're like, well, he's at the hospital. Yeah, but we're not sending somebody over there to go check on him.
Right.
Right? You need to bring us a doctor letter or something. Well, so you go to the hospital. If you can find the doctor, you say, hey, doc, John's incapacitated. He's right there in the next room. He's in a coma. I need to pay his cable bills. Will you write a letter that says John's incapacitated so I can go access all of his money?
Yeah.
And the doctor laughs in your face and says, I ain't signing that. I mean, what happens if you misuse it based on the letter that I wrote? And then John wakes up from his coma in a week and he's mad about all of this. You know, he's going to sue you for misusing the power of attorney, but he's also going to sue me for writing the stupid letter.
Yep.
So I'm not signing that.
Oh, yeah.
So you have a power of attorney now that is useless.
Yeah.
It does you no good.
Because you can't get the proof.
Because
that
you
you're
can't
disabled.
get the proof, right? It sounds good enough to say, oh, if a doctor says I'm incapacitated, yeah, good luck getting a doctor to say that.
Yeah.
Even if you're clearly incapacitated, right?
Right.
So you can end up with a power of attorney that's virtually useless. And well, was that even if you got the doctor's letter, right? You take that back to the bank and the bank's like, well, yeah, but this guy's just the family practice doctor.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't this be a neurologist or a psychologist that can speak more adequately?
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, the point is, if I trust you enough to handle my finances and pay my bills and take care of me, then I should just give you the power.
Yeah.
And so that immediate power of attorney is almost always going to be the right choice. Now, there can be this circumstance where maybe for whatever reason, that's not the right, but generally that's going to be the right choice. The other thing is I can always turn a immediate power of attorney into a springing power of attorney.
Ah, okay.
Right? Because I do the power of attorney and it says, I appoint Devin and you can do all the things right now.
Mm-hmm.
But not if you don't have it.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Right? If I just keep it and maybe I tell you and I say, hey, Devin, if something happens to me, there's a binder in the desk drawer in the second bedroom that's got my estate planning stuff in it.
Yeah.
There's powers of attorney and stuff like that in there. And so if something happens to me, get into the house, get those documents, right? Well, now it's a springing power of attorney, effectively, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to let you have it. And I wouldn't appoint you if I thought you were going to break into the house and steal a copy.
You've got bigger problems.
Right. Yeah, I've got bigger problems. Right. So you can turn an immediate power of attorney into what is effectively a springing.
Okay.
All right.
So that's on the financial power of attorney.
And I'm not even done.
All right.
I'm not even moving on yet.
Oh, goodness. All right.
All right. Because there's one other thing I want to point out before we go forward. So I've done this power of attorney, right? I've appointed you. I think we could all agree, you, me, the listeners, everybody would agree with the following statement. If I'm incapacitated, your job is to use these assets for my benefit.
Yes. Yeah.
Clear as a bell, right?
That seems straightforward.
No question
and
about it.
Something that's
Okay.
you would assume.
So here's the scenario. Same situation, right? I've become incapacitated, but now it's permanent, right? I'm going to need long-term care. You talk to an elder law attorney or somebody like that, and they're talking about Medicaid as an option for paying for my care. Of course, that's a need-based program. You're going to have to reduce my assets in some way. And among all of the various options, one of the options that comes up is that if I had a disabled child, you could transfer my assets to the disabled child, and that's a permitted transfer under the Medicaid rules. And so you could get me qualified for Medicaid, preserve my assets, and benefit my disabled child all at the same time.
Okay.
Now, if you asked me right now and you said, hey, John, If you became incapacitated, would you rather your money go to your disabled child or get burned up private paying for your care until you go broke and qualify for Medicaid? Well, that's a no-brainer question. Yeah. So you know me well enough to say, I know what John would want. So you go to the bank, you take my money out, you give it to the disabled child. But the question is, did you use the money for my benefit?
Yeah.
And the answer to that's no.
Right.
You gave it away. Mm-hmm. There's no situation where giving my money away is for me, even if it does qualify me for Medicaid, right? Because I could private pay. Mm-hmm. That does not benefit me. I don't see a difference in my level of care, right? Benefits my daughter, doesn't benefit me. So that would be outside the boundaries of the normal power of attorney. And yet it's something that I would have wanted.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason I mention all of this is because that power of attorney, where people get in trouble with them, is not with what the document says, but with what it doesn't say. Right? They're looking at their power of attorney at home. They raced home after listening to the show, and they pull that power of attorney out, and it says, I appoint Schmitty to do all the things I could do, period. End of story. Seems comprehensive enough. All the things.
Right. All the things.
Except all the things does not include the power to make a gift.
Yeah.
That's what we call a hot power. It's just a personal term, right? But we call them hot powers because they're outside the boundaries. If I wanted you to have that power, I would need to say, I appoint Devin to do all the things, comma, and make a gift on my behalf, at least under certain circumstances. So what about changing the beneficiary on your retirement account?
Yeah.
That's a hot power. That has no benefit to you, to me, if I'm the incapacitated person, you having the power to change the beneficiary on my retirement account does not benefit me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
However, if one of my kids has a drug problem, and you know my family well enough that we need to change the beneficiary to put that in trust for that drug-addicted child.
Yeah.
But you don't have the power.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
So it needs to be an expansive document that covers in detail everything you could possibly do, not just for the person, but also taking into consideration these other planning options and things that could happen out there. So, you mentioned earlier the guy at the church, and he listed, I was talking about the insurance, and you should insure for all of these things. And he said one of the items that is a will.
Right.
He was wrong.
Yeah.
One of the items was the financial power of attorney.
Oh, for sure.
That document is more important to you than a will. Period. End of story. No question about it. Everybody across the board, everybody that's listening, everybody that's over the age of 18
should have a financial power of attorney.
No question about it.
Excellent.
If you've got kids that are going off to college at 18, they've signed a financial power of attorney.
Yeah. Along
with some of these other things. But so that was a long part on just that one single thing. So first is financial, second medical. Mm-hmm. Now that's an easier concept, right? Here's who I want to make my medical decisions.
Yeah.
Interesting side note, medical power of attorney, always springing.
Ah, okay.
Right? If I'm at the hospital and you're at the hospital and the doctor comes in and says, John, I got bad news. You're going to die.
Yeah. Right.
Good news, though. I got a magic pill.
Yes.
And if you take the magic pill, you will live.
Yep.
And I say, Doc, not interested. Mm-hmm. I don't take magic pills. So I'm going to die. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Now you standing over there in the hospital and you say, hey, wait a second, Doc, I've got John's medical power of attorney. I want you to take that pill and wrap it up in a piece of cheese and shove it down his throat like he's an old Labrador. Right? No, it's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
You only have the power if I can't make my own medical decision.
Okay.
Period.
Understood.
End of story, right? And that's a situation where the doctor right then is going to make that determination.
Yeah.
Because on the other, on the one hand, I can say, I don't want the pill. On the other, but if I say, Doc, I don't want the pill because I saw where if I take the pill, it grows into the alien and then the alien comes out of my chest and then it grows into the big alien and then the big alien ravishes the whole hospital and kills everybody.
Next thing you know, we have the Bob-verse.
The doctor's going to look over at you and say, okay, Devin, would you like me to wrap this up in a piece of cheese and shove it down John's throat like an old Labrador?
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
I'm clearly
Something's
talking out of my mind.
clearly wrong with him.
Yeah, I'm clearly talking out of my mind. So that's the medical power of attorney. All right. Along with the medical power, the companion to the medical power of attorney is a HIPPO release. That's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. If I see one more person write HIPPA, I may lose my mind. It's not HIPAA spelled like hippo. It's HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That's 2 A's at the end, HIPAA. HIPAA, that's the privacy law that says nobody can look at your medical records. Nobody that you want to look at your medical records can look at your medical records. Now, lots of people that you don't want can still look at your medical records.
Yeah.
Federal government, hospital, and all of their people, your insurance, all those, they can all look at your medical records without your HIPAA authorization. But if you want your wife or your husband or your kids to know about your medical situation, they got to be on a HIPAA release.
Yeah.
You could include the HIPAA release in the medical power of attorney. And in fact, doing so is not a bad idea. That way it's all contained in one document, right?
Yeah.
The people that I've appointed as my medical power of attorney, they have authorization under HIPAA. That makes sense. It may also make sense to have it as a standalone document. 2 reasons. So one, let's say I'm going to appoint you, Devin, as my agent under my medical power of attorney. So I want you making the decisions. I don't want your wife, Karen, making any of the decisions.
Okay.
However, I do know that you can't stay at the hospital 24 hours a day, right? So you and Karen are going to run shifts. She's going to sit with me for a while. You're going to sit with me for a while. And when Karen's sitting there by herself and the doctor comes in, he's going to need to communicate.
Right.
Right? I don't necessarily need Karen making the decision. She can relay that back to you and you can make the decision. But I might still want her on the HIPAA release so she can at least know what's going on.
Right.
That kind of example is going to be particular in, say, a blended family, right? You're appointing your wife, who you've been married to for 30 years, to make your medical decisions, but you still want your kids to be able to get the information.
Yeah. Right.
So wife's on the medical power of attorney with a HIPAA release. Kids and wife are on a standalone HIPAA release that they can present if they're denied access to any of your medical information.
Ah, gotcha.
Right? And so that's 1, 2, and 3. And then 4 on my little list would be the directive to physicians, a.k.a. Advance Directive, a.k.a. Living Will. This is you telling the rest of the world whether or not to keep you on the machines if all they're doing is prolonging the moment of your death.
Yeah.
You're going to die.
Yep.
That's it.
And they know it.
They know
It's just a matter of...
Your body just doesn't know it. And the reason it doesn't know it is because a respirator is breathing for you, a feeding tube is pumping food into you, artificial hydration, and all of the other things that are associated with that.
Yeah.
So now one thing I will note on again, usually that's going to be pretty general. Any life-saving procedures, if there's no hope of recovery.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea to think through that a little bit. There may be, for example, certain religious reasons or things that you want one thing or not, or the other. The other thing is to make sure it's expansive enough. So, for example, would you consider antibiotics to be life-saving measures?
It certainly could be.
It could be in the right scenario, right? Because if I'm in a persistent vegetative state and I'm never going to get any better, right? I'm just laying there, right, in this persistent vegetative state, and I get pneumonia. Well, the pneumonia is going to kill me.
Right.
Unless I get antibiotics. Well, why in the world would you give me antibiotics just so I can recover from the pneumonia and maintain in my persistent vegetative state? So, you know, that's maybe one of those things that, you know, you think about respirators and feeding tubes and artificial hydration, but you don't necessarily think about dialysis,
Right.
antibiotics,
Yeah.
you know, and some of those sort of things.
Yeah.
Speaking of pneumonia, did you see Val Kilmer died?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, saw that. Just saw that on the news. Died of pneumonia.
No way.
Yeah,
Did not see that.
Yeah.
How old was he?
not old enough.
Yeah.
But he has had some significant medical issues.
Yeah.
And so, shout out to Iceman.
Yeah. Man, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, so financial power of attorney, medical power of
Yes.
attorney, HIPPO release, directive to physicians, aka Advance Directive.
man, there's a lot to think through here for sure.
So yeah, I mean that's really not even all of part one.
No, it's not.
We're just scratching the surface. So, you know, we've got, but the biggest part of having a plan for incapacity, because the minute you become incapacitated, these things have to happen.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be able to talk to the doctors. Somebody's got to be able to handle your business. They got to be able to do the things.
Yeah.
And if your medical situation is bad enough, you need to give them some direction as to what to do at that end of life.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
those things, when I say everybody over the age of 18 walking around should have all four of those things in place, I'm not exaggerating.
No, not at all. And I noticed that was, you know, in the estate plan that you did for me, it was just part of what you included, right? It was just in
It is.
there. Yeah.
It is.
So, John, let's put a pin in this episode.
Okay.
We've gone roughly half an hour, something like that.
Yeah, we'll just
and
pick up.
we don't want to take this too long because people are going to start dropping off. And the second part of planning for incapacity really gets into some important stuff. So I want everyone to save their fresh listening ears and their viewing eyes for this second part of this. But before we go, I have to read one of our latest reviews that we got. Let's see. Let me find this. This is from a retired attorney.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
Who listens to our show.
and as we've said before, I don't pay any attention to the reviews. So I rely entirely on Devin to read them to me. So I have no idea what's coming.
Well, and for some reason, it won't even open up the full review. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, but here's the first part about it. He said, you dudes not only make me feel smarter every time I listen to them, but I'd also be happy to drink a beverage with you. That was his first sentence.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that's the way that, and then he said, which is a rare combination. I'm sure it is. That is a fantastic review. We love to get those kind of reviews
Yeah,
from our
it's
clients.
awesome.
And if you'd like to leave us a review, especially on Apple Podcast, that's where we love to get those, and they're all consolidated there. And it tells Apple Podcasts, which is about 75% of our listeners on the audio side of the podcast. Those things are fantastic for spreading the word and exposing the show to more people. Well, very good. Let's wind it up right there. We're going to come back in the next episode, and we're going to talk about the second part of planning for incapacity. Very good. All right. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.